ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
What do Rasputin, Tupac and Pharaoh Ramses III have in common? No, it's not the weirdest boy band ever. They all met their end at the hand of an assassin. From seizing power to silencing dissidents, Assassins unpacks the moments in which someone decides that murder is the move. Search for Assassins with Aslan Pahari on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
We have breaking news this hour. The US President Donald Trump says Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement on the first phase of a plan to stop fighting in Gaza, including the release of hostages and prisoners.
After 3 days of crunch time talks, a deal has been done. US President Donald Trump made the announcement on Truth Social.
And Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable and everlasting peace.
All of the remaining Israeli hostages would be released. There are 48 still in Gaza. 20 of them are believed to be alive.
President Trump, thank you very much. אנחנו מודים לו.
Has Donald Trump actually done it? Brought an end to the war in Gaza? After months of negotiations, there's been a breakthrough, with Hamas agreeing to release the remaining Israeli hostages as part of the first phase of a peace deal. Today, international relations expert Rajan Menon on what we know so far and whether this could be the end to hostilities. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Rajan, it was Donald Trump who first indicated that a deal for peace in Gaza was very close. He was passed a note during a meeting at the White House from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East and they're going to need me pretty quickly, so I will take a couple of more questions.
Just tell me about that. It was quite incredible.
Right. It was incredible. What we know is that not just Trump in the United States, but also Israel and Hamas and the three mediators, Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, have also been very upbeat. Hamas said that Israel and it had agreed on an exchange, that is 48 prisoners held by Hamas, Israeli prisoners, 20 of whom are still alive, and 1,950 Palestinians held in Israeli jails. The one thing about this that's surprising, Sam, is that Hamas had always said, we cannot agree to a deal that does not involve the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces. From what I can tell, as best I can tell, it seems that Hamas has caved on this particular issue and Israeli forces will remain in Gaza. Now, they may pull back to an initial first line, but they're not going to depart completely.
Yes, because the deal, Rajan, says that Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed upon line.
Correct.
So what do you make of that? That means they will still be in Gaza.
Right. They'll still be in Gaza. And Netanyahu has always insisted that he will remain in an area called the Philadelphia Corridor, which is just south in the far south of Gaza along the border with Egypt. But also that as the IDF withdraws, it will maintain a buffer zone that cuts into Gaza. What Hamas has wanted is a free and clear, complete withdrawal. They're not going to get that. Now, why did they decide to agree despite not getting this concession from Israel? The Hamas people say that they took a risk because they had been assured by Trump that A, this will be a permanent ceasefire, and B, that he will not allow Israel to resume the war. This is a gamble because, as you remember, some days ago, President Trump said Hamas has indicated that it's interested in peace and Israel should therefore immediately stop the bombing. And Netanyahu did no such thing. So Hamas is taking a bit of a gamble here. There's no question about it.
Well, Hamas has, of course, agreed to release the hostages, dead and alive. What a relief for the families.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
What a moment for them.
No doubt.
And that will happen, within 72 hours or so?
Correct. The other point to bear in mind is that the people of Gaza have endured absolute hell. So while it is certainly true, and we should celebrate the fact that the hostages are being released and their families and friends would be very happy, this comes as a godsend for the people of Gaza, because they have no control over the actions of any of the major actors. But they are bearing the brunt of this, and they are literally at a breaking point. So all in all, if this comes to fruition, it'll be a good thing.
Well, the Israeli Prime Minister, as you said, he's welcomed this deal. He says it's a great day for Israel. He's thanked the heroic IDF soldiers, and he says the Israeli government will now ratify this deal. So just give me your initial assessment here, Rajan, before we move on, because this is just the first phase. There's other phases to come. But 2 years since this war began, what's your initial assessment? Is this the start of the end of this war?
It all depends on whether Trump can, in fact, deliver on his promise that Israel will not resume the war. And that is really the key, because Hamas could find itself in a situation, in a worst-case scenario, where it has agreed to release all the hostages, thereby surrendering what it regards as its biggest point of leverage, only to find that the war has begun again. And that could happen for several reasons. First, that Netanyahu may still remain convinced that the only way to solve what he sees as the Gaza problem is by outright destroying Hamas. Now, whether one thinks that's possible or not, he believes it's true. The other reason is that his two far-right coalition partners, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, have said that they will under no circumstances accept a deal that does not allow Israel to continue the war and destroy Hamas. So Netanyahu has a big bit of work to do to sell the deal to his coalition. So there are ways in which this could come unstuck. But I'll say this, after a great deal of uncertainty, we are at the most hopeful point we've been in the last 2 years since this war began.
So, Rajan, this is the first phase of a peace plan that's been negotiated. There are 20 points to this plan. Now, another key element is this condition that Hamas disarms completely. Now, has Hamas indicated that it is willing to do that?
So in the press reports that I have seen, at least, there isn't any detail on the so-called decommissioning of Hamas. It may be that Hamas is dragging its feet on decommissioning because it wants to make sure that it's not in the worst of all possible worlds. That is to say, releasing the hostages and then surrendering all of its weapons and therefore being completely at the mercy of Israel. I'm not saying that they haven't agreed to surrender their weapons and to destroy their military infrastructure. It is that the press reports so far, for some reason, fail to mention that. Whether that's because it's still under negotiation or whether Hamas has rung a concession about delaying that, it's not clear to me. But it is interesting that we don't have any clear indication about where things stand on that particular point, namely Hamas surrendering its weapons.
And another point, of course, is the future governance of Gaza. Do we know then if Hamas is willing to hand over power to this proposed peace board, which is in this plan, that will be initially chaired, of course, by Donald Trump?
So here there have been differences between Hamas and the United States. So Trump's idea is to have a peace board on which he will preside over, and it would include Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister. What Hamas worries about is that this peace board and its executive bureaucracy will amount to some kind of external viceroyalty that will dictate how Gaza will be governed. And it has wanted to make sure that there are mechanisms whereby the interim technocratic government to which Hamas has agreed to hand over power won't be just a puppet and will actually be able to make sure that Gaza is governed in a way that reflects the needs and sentiments of its people. Where we are on that, it's not clear. I think everybody's focused now for the moment on what is within their grasp, and that is the hostage release, the prisoner exchange, and the end to the war.
Yes. So this is the first phase. We don't know, I guess, about the subsequent phases of this deal because I think it's clear they are still being negotiated. But I think what people really want to know, Rajan, is does this mean the end to the bombing in Gaza? Does it mean the end to the fighting in Gaza? Do we know if that's what it means?
Right. So I'm going to hedge on this a little bit, and I'll tell you why. You'll recall in January of this year, Israel and Hamas signed a ceasefire agreement, right? And there were multiple phases, swaps, Israeli-held prisoners, Palestinian prisoners for hostages and so on. And that all went very well. And then the talks reached a phase in which the withdrawal of Israeli troops was to be negotiated. And Netanyahu walked away from that deal and the war began. And that was followed by very strict limits, virtually without exception, on humanitarian aid into Gaza. So Hamas has that in its mind and worries about that. So the real question is, will President Trump tell the Israelis that they have to agree that this ceasefire will be permanent and that what happened in the case of the January 2025 agreement cannot be allowed to repeat?
Because it's not a ceasefire yet, is it?
No.
Not until the bombing stops.
Not until the bombing stops. And then, what Hamas wants is not just the bombing to stop, but to stop forever, a permanent peace.
Yeah. And Rajan, of course, any deal requires that both sides stick to it.
Well, I think there's no incentive for Hamas to resume the war again because it's facing a formidable military force. It's lost a lot of its fighters, and even though it's recruited others, it's on the back foot. And most of Gaza is either occupied by or in varying degrees controlled by the IDF. The United States stands with Israel, continues to arm it. So Hamas isn't holding very many cards here. And most of the Arab states and European countries like France have said it has to sign this deal. So it is in a very, very difficult position. And what it's trying to do is to get the best deal it can. And I think to some degree, although it launched an attack on Israel that then led to a devastating response that's killed, I would imagine, well over 100,000 people, because the numbers we have don't count those people in the rubble. It's mindful that it needs to wind down the war for the sake of the people that it represents, namely people in Gaza.
All right, well, Rajan, if this is indeed the start of the end of this war, attention will need to turn, won't it, to rebuilding Gaza and to feeding the population. So how quickly would that happen?
So on that, I think there will be an agreement on the resumption of humanitarian aid without limits. And I think Trump can deliver that part of it. Reconstruction is a much longer-term project because 90% of Gaza's residential buildings have either been destroyed or have been flattened. Huge numbers of schools and shopping centers and hospitals have either been destroyed or are in a state of disrepair. So we are talking about a decades-long project of bringing Gaza to the point where something called normalcy can resume in the lives of Gazans. That is a big, big project that will require a lot of money. Now, there's money to be had because the Gulf states are very wealthy. President Trump has all kinds of investors, including from his own family, that might want to get into the act. So it's possible, but we should not hold our breath. It's going to take a very, very long time. And this is now a shattered territory.
All right, well, Donald Trump, he's made no secret of the fact that he's lobbying for the Nobel Peace Prize. But Rajan, if he solves this, he does deserve some credit, doesn't he? Maybe not the prize, but some credit.
No question. I don't think it could have happened. I don't think the Israelis would have moved from some of their positions without Trump's involvement. And if the deal is struck and the guns fall silent, he certainly deserves credit. Whether he'll get the Nobel Prize, I don't know, because, I can't speak for the Nobel Committee, but the way they might look at it is, yes, he stopped the war. But since coming to power, he, like Biden, has armed the Israelis with what they have used and needed to basically flatten Gaza. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, he stopped the war, but he's also deeply implicated in the war. Does that qualify him for a prize? I'm going to let the Nobel people worry about that.
Rajan Menon is a Professor Emeritus of International Relations at the City College of New York. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed, Cinnamon Nippard and Jessica Wukyanov. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. ABC News Daily will be back again on Monday. Thanks for listening.